Hold a flame to this rock, and it does something rock is not supposed to do. It catches. And as it burns, it starts to sweat out oil. They call it oil shale. And beneath Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado, there is enough of it to hold an estimated 3 trillion barrels. Let that number sit for a second. In our entire history, every well ever drilled, every field ever pumped dry, every barrel ever burned, the human race has consumed roughly 1 trillion barrels of oil. This one formation holds 3 times that. The U.S. Geological Survey calls it the largest oil resource known anywhere on Earth. Now look at this. A half-built city in the Colorado high desert. Empty streets laid out in neat grids. Schools with no children. Homes no one ever moved into. It was built for the oil in that rock. And today it stands as the most expensive ghost town in American history. Because in more than 100 years of trying, not one single barrel has ever come out of the ground. Here's the part that makes no sense. America has known about this deposit since the 1800s. The largest energy companies on the planet, Exxon, Shell, Chevron, have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into it. Some of the sharpest engineers in the country have spent entire careers chasing it. More than a century of effort, and the best minds in the industry all pointed at the same patch of rock. And that rock is still sitting there completely untouched. Meanwhile, America ships in oil from the other side of the world, tankers crossing whole oceans to supply a country floating on the largest deposit ever found. It is one of the strangest contradictions in the history of energy, a nation that has spent fortunes searching the globe for crude, sitting on more of it than anyone, and unable to use a drop. So how does that happen? How does the greatest oil nation on Earth fail for 100 years straight to pull a single barrel out of its biggest prize? The answer runs from a surveyor with a lit match in 1874 to a phone call on a quiet Sunday morning in 1982 to a problem that, even in 2026, nobody has managed to solve. It starts in 1874, almost by accident. A government surveyor is working his way along a river in Wyoming when he notices something strange about the gray rocks along the bank. On a whim, the kind of thing you do out of sheer boredom in the middle of nowhere, he holds a flame to one. And the rock catches fire. Stone that burns. He had no idea what he was looking at. What he'd stumbled onto was the ragged edge of a deposit so vast it would take the government 4 more decades just to begin measuring it. By 1914, the USGS had published its first major report on the formation, and the true scale of what lay beneath the Rocky Mountain West started, slowly, to come into focus. That was more than a century ago, and that burning rock has been taunting engineers ever since. Because once they started mapping it, the numbers stopped making sense. The deposit is called the Green River Formation, and it sprawls across 3 enormous basins: the Pisceance in Colorado, the Uinta in Utah, and the Greater Green River in Wyoming, covering roughly 16,000 square miles. The USGS spent decades surveying it, and when they added it all up, the 3 basins together held more than 4 trillion barrels of hydrocarbons. Enough on paper to run the entire United States for centuries. Say that out loud one more time. 3 trillion recoverable barrels. 3 times all the oil the human race has ever consumed. Sitting under 3 American states right now while you watch this. Not in some distant, hostile corner of the world, but under quiet ranch land a few hours' drive from Denver. So the resource is not in doubt. It has never been in doubt. There is no argument over whether the oil is down there, no debate about the scale, no missing piece of the map. It is simply, undeniably, the richest hydrocarbon deposit ever identified on the face of the planet, which is exactly what makes the failure to touch it so maddening. And to understand that failure, you have to go back to the last time America got desperate enough to really try. In the 1970s, the world ran short of oil. Prices exploded. Cars snaked around the block at gas stations, and America suddenly remembered it was sitting on the largest deposit on the planet. Money came flooding into the Rocky Mountain West. Exxon, At that moment, the biggest company in the world put $300 million into a single project near Parachute, Colorado. And the plan was almost hard to believe. 6 open-pit mines, each one larger than what was then the biggest mine on Earth. A network of fuel plants that, at the industry's most ambitious projections, aimed to produce millions of barrels a day. And a brand new city, Battlement Mesa, raised from bare ground to house the army of workers it would all require. Exxon projected that 1.75 million people would flood the western slope, a metropolis to rival Denver, rising straight out of the desert. Parachute went from 300 residents to 1,200, with projections running as high as 15,000. Trailer camps sprouted on the edge of town, airports expanded. Local governments started planning for 200,000 new arrivals. After a century of waiting, it finally felt inevitable. Then came the morning of Sunday, May 2nd, 1982. A police officer in Garfield County picked up the phone. Exxon was shutting the whole thing down, effective immediately. More than 2,000 workers were laid off before the day was over, and that same officer spent the following week going door to door, serving eviction notices to families who had uprooted their entire lives for jobs that had just ceased to exist. They still call it Black Sunday. $85 million in annual payroll evaporated overnight. In the 2 years that followed, 24,000 people drained out of the region. Banks that had survived the Great Depression finally closed their doors, and Battlement Mesa, the city meant to rival Denver, was left half-built and silent. Which drops us right back onto the question we started with. Because Exxon didn't just lose its nerve, it slammed into a wall no amount of money could climb. Here's the catch the title promised. The thing inside that rock isn't actually oil. Not yet. It's a substance called kerogen, organic material that got buried and heated and then simply stopped, frozen halfway between ancient life and crude. In Texas, or on Alaska's North Slope, nature finished the job over millions of years and left behind liquid petroleum you can pump straight out of the ground. Here, nature quit early. To finish what it started, you have to do it yourself, heating the rock past 750 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is precisely where every attempt has died, against 2 immovable walls. The first is energy. Cooking millions of tons of rock to that temperature demands so much power that you can end up burning nearly as much energy as the oil would ever give back. It becomes a treadmill, pouring in almost everything you get out. And if the point of an oil industry is to end up with more energy than you started with, a project that barely breaks even on that math is not really an industry at all. It's a science experiment with a very large electricity bill. The second is water. Extracting a single barrel can require up to 5 barrels of fresh water pulled from the Colorado River system in one of the most arid regions in the entire country. At the scale Exxon had drawn up, the water demand alone would have been a catastrophe for every city and farm downstream. In a part of the world where water is already fought over in courtrooms, an oil industry that drinks the river dry was never going to be an easy sell. The rock can be heated. That was never really the question. Engineers have mined it, crushed it, cooked it on the surface, and even heated it while it sat deep underground. Every method works, in the narrow sense that oil does come out. The question was always whether it could ever pay for itself, whether what you pull out is worth more than what you burn and spend to get it. And for more than 100 years, the answer has stubbornly, consistently been no. And the strangest part is why the oil got stuck halfway in the first place. 50 million years ago, this was not desert. 2 vast freshwater lakes covered the region. For ages, algae and tiny organisms rained down onto the lake beds, layer upon layer, until they were buried under thousands of feet of sediment. In most basins, that is exactly where nature takes over and slowly cooks the whole thing into crude. But here, the lakes dried up, the burial stopped, and the rock never got hot enough to finish the recipe. The transformation just paused. Nature got the ingredients right, assembled everything it needed, and then walked away before the final step. And it has stayed that way ever since. A half-finished job left sitting in the ground for 50 million years. So the rock is still out there. Beneath the quiet high desert of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, 50 million years of ancient lakebed sits in the exact same stone it has always been in. 3 trillion barrels, waiting on a problem that has beaten every attempt since 1874. Shale is still quietly working on it, heating the rock underground very slowly, over years rather than days, betting the economics finally tip in its favor. The technology keeps improving. The math still doesn't quite work. But the oil doesn't care about the price of a barrel this quarter, or which company walked away last, or what anyone promised the town of Parachute. It's just there. And if the calculus ever shifts, if prices climb high enough, if the technology gets cheap enough, if the country ever needs it badly enough, then the deposit that built the most expensive ghost town in America might finally give something back. Every generation since 1874 has looked at that rock and seen the future. Every generation has been wrong. Maybe the next one won't be. It has already waited 50 million years. It can wait a little longer. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment about which place we should explore next. Thanks for watching.